It's Sunday, it's tea time. Let's start the stream. Hello friends and welcome to today's Sunday stream. I hope you're doing well today. Do come say hello in the chat, let us know who's out there and what you're up to. I see that we've got Maria again. Hi Maria. And Caligero, welcome to the stream. Who else do we have out there today? So I've got a fun stream coming up today. I've got a few things to show you that I think you will enjoy. Hi there, Maria. So here we are streaming on Twitch and on YouTube. And then the stream is being recorded and will be later available on YouTube for you to watch later with timestamps for you to jump to each section. Hello there, Kamisa. How are you doing today? Is anybody drawing or animating in the background or doing any schoolwork? What are you up to? So you can follow me on my socials. I'm on Facebook and on Twitter, where I share stories, videos, animations and news that you might be interested in. And you can join me on my Discord with a link down below if you want to come and chat with like-minded people. And if you want to support the channel, there's a number of ways you can do so. So on YouTube, just subscribing and watching my videos helps. Sharing them with your friends also helps. Hitting like and commenting adds the engagement that YouTube likes, so that's really useful. Or if you can help financially, there's my OpenToonz and Tahoma course on Udemy, but more on that later. You can buy me a coffee if you want to by following the link down in the description. Or here on YouTube, you can buy a super chat to ask me anything you like and get your comment noticed. But just being here on the stream really helps too. Hi there, Tom. Welcome to the stream. Let's see who we've got. Great, I hope you're doing well today. So, what's the plan for today? Let me give you a quick rundown if you've not seen it already in the title or the description. Well, first I want to chat a little more about the Motion Path Step Visualiser that I showed last week that's now available in Tahoma 2D. There's been some improvements since last week's video. Jeremy watched the video and really engaged in what I was saying and in the way it worked, and has made some changes to make it run much smoother, so I'll show those today. And then I want to show how you can use motion paths to actually drive your animation in Tahoma and in OpenToonz. And this is because motion paths have been in the program from the very beginning, and it's only the step visualizer that's new in Tahoma. So we'll take a look at those two things. And then I'll announce and complete the next animation challenge in my Discord animation challenges. So if you're not familiar with those, I've got a number of animation challenges over on the Discord, and you complete them in turn, starting with the first one through up to number 10. And then when you've completed each one, I'll take a look at it and then award you a new animation role on the server and reveal the next challenge. And today I'll go through challenge number 8 on the challenge list. So I'm looking forward to getting to that. That's great. Yes, switching to Tahoma. I'm really happy with it. It's so much nicer to use than OpenToonz. So I'm really pleased that you've managed to make the switch. And today I'll be using Tahoma, but I'll be using a slightly newer version just to show this new feature that's coming up, which will be hopefully in version 1.2, which I'm hoping might be released around Christmas, if not then early next year. So before we go through all that, I'd like to take a quick look at the week in recap. I know, Caligero, the 11-second club. I'm about to take a look at that as it happens. So let's take a look at this here. So I'd like to share a few things that's happened this week here on the Discord server. So the first one is from last Friday, is my video, if you haven't seen already. It's a speed paint of SpongeBob SquarePants. And I used a few different techniques for this, based on what I've learned in the past about drawing, and I'll share those next week, but more on that later. So if you haven't seen that already, do take a look at that, and there's a link down in the description for that. And over on the Discord server, there's been quite a lot of art and animation shared again, so I'd like to share some of that with you. So here in the Your Art server, Greg the Stickman Animator has been absolutely smashing it with his art this week, so it's great to see some of that. Tuffle Girl, with what looks like a possible self-portrait. And coming up to Art with Amar, who's been sharing more of his sheets, his character sheets, for his new animation that he's working on. And hopefully, if you're out there at Amar, you'll continue to share those with us on the server. It's great to see them. Thank you, Maria. I'm really pleased you enjoyed it. I did really enjoy making it myself and was so pleased with the outcome. That's why I've made next week's video, to share a few tips that might help you all. Okay, over in the OpenToonz community, in the OpenToonz animations, here we go. So Kaylo's been working on the 11-second club, as you've just mentioned, and is working on this animation for Dora the Explorer. And basically in the 11-second club, there's a website for it. If you search for 11-second club, if you're interested in joining, they share an 11-second clip of audio from a film or TV programme, and your challenge is to animate to it. And he's been sharing the stages so far for putting this animation together. And I hope you can continue to share them as you progress into the final animation and the colouring, because it's really interesting to look at. So thank you for sharing that. In the Tahoma animations, so there's my head turn, which we'll take a look at in a second. This head turn here, which is really good. I don't know why it makes me smile. I think it's because I think his eyes pop out over the sides, but it's a great exercise to work on, having a turning head, rotating 360 degrees. There's this great animation here again by the same guy, and it's just, again, it's a little animation to make you smile. A small looping dancing animation, great. And again, made in Tahoma. So thanks for sharing that. There's a stop motion test here, and if you haven't tried the stop motion tools in Tahoma, then please do take a look at them. It's a lot of fun to do this. And I did do a little stop motion test myself last week, live on the stream, and if you're interested in more of that, do let me know. And I think finally for this section is Terrific's head turn, which is his entry for the Noble Frugal Studios animation challenge this week. And he's challenged people to do a head turn animated, preferably in OpenToonz or Tahoma. And it's a classic animation exercise, and this is a great entry. And I saw this entry before I made my own. So I was kind of a little bit worried about trying to make one, but I did. I went ahead and made one anyway, and I'll show you that in a second. But that's a great entry there from Terrific. And hopefully we'll find out who the winner or winners are over on Noble Frugal's channel. And also, I wanted to show you this small animation from QB, who shared it with us. And he's a subscriber to the Discord channel and shares animations and drawings. And I've got the link to this down in the description. So if you haven't seen it already, do take a look at this film. It's a short animation, 7 minutes long, and it's really fun, really enjoyable, so do take a look. I love the style of it, the bright colours, the plainer backgrounds is just really, really nice. So do take a look at that when you get a few minutes. And one more animation I came across this week that I wanted to share with you, called Spring Herald. And I believe this was a final year animation from somebody at CalArts Animation School. And it's quite reminiscent of Studio Ghibli films. And it's just so beautifully done. Again, only 1.5 minutes long, so I won't play it all here, but do take a look at that. And there's also a behind the scenes video for that, so have a watch of that. It's really interesting to watch. So that's the videos and art that I wanted to share with you this week. So if you get a chance, take a look at them later on. The links are in the description down below in the YouTube. Hi there, Jay. Welcome to the channel. Hope you're having a good afternoon today. No, I don't believe it is made in OpenToonz, that last one, the Spring Herald. It's just a really great looking animation, and it's something to aspire to. So it's something that I thought I'd share with you while I was online today. And I mentioned with my speed paint of SpongeBob that next week I was going to share some drawing tips with you, and I'll just quickly share the thumbnail for next week's video. So I've got 5 top drawing tips that have really helped me improve, and even though I've got a long way to go to get better and I've got a lot of areas I need to work on, these tips that I've picked up from other animators online and artists online really helped me, so I wanted to share them with you. So do watch out for that next week. Okay, so I mentioned the first thing I wanted to look at was the motion path improvements. So let me start a new project here in Tahoma, and do fire any questions to me if you have any as we go through, either about what I'm doing in Tahoma or about anything in general related to OpenToonz. So let me start a new project. Hi there, is that Bergud? Hi there, welcome to the stream. Okay, so I mentioned about the motion path pop-up. Hi there, Suhas. Welcome to the stream. And you can find that in the new Tahoma under panels called Motion Paths. And this is actually a dialogue, not just for creating motion paths, but also for visualizing optional steps to progress through the path. And this is useful for, and particularly made for stop motion animation, but can be used for hand-drawn animation too. So let me show you how you create them. And I showed you this last week briefly. So on the motion path dialog, hit the plus button and you'll get a new path, and it shows it on screen. And these tools at the top of the bar here are just shortcuts for what's in the toolbar on the left. So you can draw a new motion path using the brush tool or one of the geometry tools. So if I use the brush tool and we just draw a squiggle, and that'll define a path of where you want your character to move or part of your animation to move. And you'll notice it's got a number of steps, these markers along the line. And you can change how many steps there are just by entering a new number. You can change the width of the line to be easier to see, and there's only 3 steps there, so we'll make it larger. And you can change the colour. And then at the bottom here we've got a graph to allow you to change the spacing of the steps on that motion path. So there's a little handle at the bottom left, and you grab the circle, and as you move it down to the right, it adds ease out from the start of the path, and the other handle at the end affects the steps at the end of the path to create ease in to the end of the path. And if you hit the play button, you'll see a ball, and I can hit repeat play, you'll see a ball moving along that path following the pace that you've set using the FPS, the frames per second, that you've set in the scene settings. So if you want it to go slower, change the scene's FPS. Or you can increase the number of steps, of course. So the more steps you have, the clearer you'll see the ease in and ease out. Now, one thing I had last week I had a problem with was creating a new path, and that's because I was using a stylus on my tablet, and it works really nicely using the mouse, but using the stylus it didn't last week. But since then, Jeremy's made some fixes, and remove the dialog that kept appearing asking if you want to replace the motion path. So if you don't like the position of this path, you can use the pen, and while the path is highlighted on the screen and you can see the paths graph here, you can just draw another path and that'll replace the one you had. So you can change the location entirely or change the shape entirely. Again, that's using the pen tool, or using one of the geometry tools, I can create any of their shapes. So a rectangle, circle, etc, etc, etc. So if I create a circle, then hit repeat play, you'll see the ball continuing around the circle with the ease in and ease out that I've already specified, which you could adjust while it's playing. So if I reduce the number of steps here, and you'll see the pace a little bit better. And this is so useful for hand-drawn animation as well as stop motion. So if you imagine you've got something moving in a circle, maybe you want to animate some sort of radar or something, and you want to have ease in and ease out. If it's moving at equal paces, that's just as easily handled by dragging these handles to point at the opposite corner. So for the end point, point that at the start, and for the start point, point it at the end until you've got a perfectly straight line, and then they're evenly spaced. And now if you know you want this to run in 40 steps here, or if I make it more accurately 48, so that's every 2 seconds at 24 FPS, you've then got the location of where to draw the radar lines to go to. And if you're using stop motion, likewise, you've got the spacing of where to place your character as you're moving around the set. So it's such a useful feature. And last week I demonstrated how you can use this to draw a bouncing ball, to move on the spot using the timing that you set up in advance using this motion path. But motion paths aren't new with this dialog in Tahoma. Motion paths were here all along, which brings me to the next topic. And that is using motion paths to actually drive the animation rather than being a guide for what you can see. But one quick thing before we move on. Something I was struggling with last week, and then I've worked out after the stream, is all the time you've got the motion path on screen and you can see this spacing graph at the bottom of the dialog, you can't draw on screen, because drawing using the drawing tools, either from the toolbar here or the main toolbar, affects the current motion path. So you can draw using the pen or the geometry tools, or you can use the control point editor to select on the path, which is like a vector path, and you can make adjustments to the shape of that path, as you can with any vector line like this. But then if you want to start drawing, what you need to do is to click into the timeline, and then that motion path will be deselected, and you can use the drawing tools as standard on normal levels. So now you can go to frame 1 and you can draw your shape here. So again, imagine the line going around for the radar, then go to frame 2, 3, and just keep going through, drawing on each frame. And then this red is just a guide, which I can hide by turning off the I button on the motion path panel. And this path isn't rendered out, that red line, it is only here on screen as a guide while you're doing your animation. And you can have multiple paths on screens by pressing the plus button more than once. And this is why it's important to know about changing the colours. So if I want a path for something else to move down here in a different time, so perhaps over just 12 frames, with a little ease in and a little ease out, they can have that on the screen as well, so that when you come to do your drawing, you can draw against either path as you're working on that particular part of the animation. So as Amar said, the motion paths are a little bit, there are two things in one. They're a little bit like the timing charts that you see in traditional animation, where you time out the spacing of the animation and the timing, but also they're the literal placing of where you want to put your animation. So really, really useful feature. But as I say, motion paths aren't just for guides for drawing against or for using the stop motion against. They're also used to actually move and drive your animation. That's right, Tom, exactly. Great for coordinating the motion of two or more characters, or for two parts of your character. So if you've got a character lifting an arm up, you can have the motion path for the arm moving, as well as perhaps the head moving at the same time, but under a different timing. So you can set out the timing for each part of the character if you want to. And you can create them willy-nilly and dispose of them by pressing the minus button here at the end. Simple, disappeared, and then when you're ready, create a new path, and again, just draw it in place of where you want it. Set the number of steps, adjust the timing, and continue. Really, really easy. But let me show you something that I found really interesting. And this is the motion paths that have always been in OpenToonz from the very beginning. I've not really spent much time using. I knew they were there, but I didn't really get into them. And it's something I was hoping to get into last week as I built my entry for Noble Frugal's animation challenge. So he's got this animation challenge where this week he wants you to animate a head turn. And the deadline was yesterday. But I only had one afternoon to do this, and I hadn't worked with the motion paths enough to be comfortable enough using them to drive the animation. So I did this by hand, a combination of by hand and using the animate tool. So if I bring this in, and if you've not seen it already, I did share it on the Discord server and on Noble Frugal's server, so you may have seen it already. So if I hit play, so I've shown his Pie the pig being hit from behind by the mustachioed apple from the channel. And it's the apple that's the interesting part for today. And that's because the path of the apple coming in, moving in, hitting him, and then bouncing off, I did use an animate tool. And I wanted to use the motion path tool, but I didn't fully understand it. But since then, I've taken some time to understand it more. And now it's just really useful that I wanted to share it today with you. And I suspect I might make an actual tutorial of how to use the motion path animation features, but for now I just wanted to share quickly how you can use it. Thank you, Tom, that's very kind of you to say so. I was hoping to put in a few more in-betweens on the animation, but I just ran out of time, unfortunately, so I had to hand it in as it was. Okay, so let me hide this column here, and in fact let me turn off the motion path we can see by unticking the eye, or I'll hit delete to actually remove it. So here in Tahoma, if we go to the FX room, and on the left here is the stage schematic, and if you're not familiar with it, then at the bottom right there's a button to switch this whole panel from being the stage schematic to the FX schematic, where you deal with the effects. But if we go back to the stage schematic, this is all about what's on the stage, what's visible. So it's about the columns and how they connect together. So all the columns connect directly to the table here. So if I add a new column, and I'll leave it as a smart raster level, and you'll see it here, column 2. I'll move that out of the way. And if I was imagining that I was going to draw that apple again, let me pop open my toolbar. I'll put it on the left and second, and the options bar. So let's put the options bar at the top. And the toolbar on the far left. Okay, that's easier to see. So I'll very quickly draw my little apple, and I'll draw him off center to show you what happens like that. In fact, back to the 2D room, it's easier because I've got all my colour in here. Okay, that'll do. That'll do. Save. So back to the FX room. So if you want to have this apple moving along a path, what you can do is when you've got the column selected, at the bottom here there's a button for motion paths. And if you press that, it creates a new motion path. And then if you select it, you'll see there's a line already on screen. But we want to create our own motion path. So again, using the pen tool, I'll draw a path. So just going from the right to the left. And that's now my motion path set for this column. If I zoom out a little, you'll notice that there's the grey box around the raster level, the Toonz raster level in column 2. And that's moved over to the right. And that's because the centre of that column has been placed at the start of that motion path. And with OpenToonz and the current version of Tahoma, the centre of the column is always attached to the motion path when it's connected like this. So if I delete that connection, you'll see column 2 come back into the camera view. And if I use the pen tool to show you where the edge of that is, you'll see it's exactly the same as the edge of the camera. And then if I connect this path back to the column by dragging from the top of the path to the bottom of the column, you'll see that drawing move over to the right, where the centre is at the start of the path. So in the new version of Tahoma, hopefully, Manong John is looking at this. Hi there, Sketch Kid, welcome to the stream. Manong John is looking at fixing it so you can use the Animate Tools Centre to move the centre point for this drawing to be anywhere on the page. But I'll show you more about that when that happens. So let me just delete those extra lines in this column. So if you want the apple to be centered on the path, for now you have to highlight the apple using the selection tool and place it in the center of that drawing. And now when I connect the path to the column, you see the apple is at the start of the path. So what we'll do is we'll extend the exposure of that drawing, and I'll give it 24 frames just to last 1 second. Then on frame 1, using the Animate tool, I'll go to Position mode, and ordinarily the Animate tool's position mode shows X and Y at the top because you can move the column anywhere on screen. But while it's connected to a path, you can't move it anywhere on screen, you can only move it along the trajectory of that path. So if I click and drag this, you select on the column, there we go. If I click and drag the apple, it can only move along that path. And as it moves, you'll see the position at the top of the screen going from 0% to 100%. So that's the full range of options for moving that apple. So I'll start on 0%, and then on frame 24, I want the apple at the end of the path, so I'll move it to the end. And you can just type the number in the position at the top here, but you can also drag it if that's a simpler way to visualize it. If we go to frame 1 and hit play, you'll see the apple move along that path. And as with any other animatable value from the Animate tool, if you go to the timing room, or if you're using OpenToonz, just go to the function editor, find the column that has the apple in it. And again, as I've said often, renaming the column is really useful to find out, to be able to keep track of which columns are which. And then we can tick the position path option to see the keys, or you can click on the folder to show all the keys, and you can see that there's only the position path has any values in it. So if I right click on the folder, I can choose to show animated only, and it'll show that one set of values only. And here you can see it moving from 0 to position 100. So there's some interpolation from the first frame to frame 24, and as I've shown you before, you can find out what that is if you go to File Preferences and then go to the Animation tab. You'll see the default interpolation is set up for me as linear, and for you it might be one of these other values, but you want to set that up before you set the animation going. But then once you've got it, you can always change it by selecting anywhere on these keys, right click and change the interpolation this way. And I'll change it to speed in and speed out, which is one of my favorites. And now if I go to the top right and press this button, I can see a graph view of the interpolation between those two keys. So if I double click on the graph, it now stretches to fit those keys on screen, and you can click and drag to highlight one of the keys and then drag this handle in the same way as we did on the Motion Path Step Visualiser to change the ease in or ease out. So there it eases in from the first movement. On the final, we want it to hit the character, so be still accelerating and going quite quickly. So I'll remove the ease out. So let's see how that looks. A little bit less there. Fine. So that's the simple way to how you can use a motion path to move an object in the real world, to animate an object that you've got drawn in a column. And because the position of the path is just one of the animatable values, you can also use any of these other animatable values, so rotation for instance. So if I go to drawing 1 and set the apple in that position and set it by drawing 24 rotated this way, the apple will now rotate as it moves through that animation. So you can use any of these animation types to change the values during an animation. And this is really handy for either mechanized movements or for movements that are less organic, I guess you'd say. So not necessarily useful for a character as he's moving his arm or walking, but great for things in the background, machinery moving, arms, mechanical arms moving. Or I considered as well, if you've got something in the background, which I'll draw in a second, that isn't so important for people to notice, but still needs some movement, that isn't just animated going left and right, but needs some more interesting movement, then the motion paths really are the thing to look to. So let me give you an example of that. If I hide the apple and add a new drawing level. So for instance, if you got, you could have a bird or a fly or an airplane doing something here. But if I just draw a little sort of fly, a little dot here like this. There we go. Teeny tiny fly. We might choose to have it moving in the background around something smelly perhaps. You might have a group of flies just buzzing around. Rather than trying to animate that manually by hand, instead you can use the motion path. So the fly, if I move him to the center of the screen, as I was saying earlier, so he'll stick to the path. In the effects room, let's rename the column to fly. Here we go. And we can add another motion path to him. And for this motion path, I will use the pen tool because I don't want a geometric shape like a circle or a square. I want it to be quite haphazard. So for instance, we've got something at the back here. Let me add another level. So the something at the back here is just a pile of rubbish. There we go. Let me just quickly fill that in with like a brown colour. if I can, make sure I've got everything on the erase tool. Marvellous. So I've got a pile of rubbish sitting there and want the fly to buzz around that. But it could be so many other things. For instance, one of your cartoon characters could be knocked out. So you've got stars circling around the head or something like that. So if I go back, select the path and make sure the path is selected while I use the pen tool. If we want the fly, we want him to start and end at the same position because we want this to be a cycling animation. So we'll start on the left and we'll just start to buzz around and then end where it starts. I'll hit save. And you'll notice that the fly column has moved to the start point of that path. So let me shrink down the timeline as much as possible and then extend the timing just to last lots of frames. Now I don't know how long you want this animation to last. You can retime that later. So for now, we'll go to the animate tool, we'll go to the position, and we'll set the position to be 0. And sometimes by setting it to 0, that doesn't always set until you've changed the last value. So let me just increase that there. There we go. So if you adjust it now, that should add a key. And if you didn't notice what I was doing, you can actually click and drag on the labels next to these edit boxes for the animate tool and for some of the other edit boxes on this options toolbar. And as you click and drag, that adjusts the value. Just go left and right. Bring that back to 0 if I can. I'll type that in. Okay. And then in the last frame, I'll put it to 100%, which is the final position. If I just rewind that, and then make sure the fly is visible through the whole of that animation. Okay, and then hit replay. And now the fly will move around that path in a looped cycle without me having to do any more than that. So if you imagine 3 or 4 of these flies moving around, that's very quickly a good way to get an animation put together compared to trying to animate this by hand, either by hand drawing each drawing or using the animate tool to change the position. Plus the path can be more flexible than using the animate tool just to move left and right and up and down. So another thing I'd like to show about this is that it's the column that's moving along the path, not the one drawing. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it's not this drawing number 1 in the level C that's moving, it's the whole fly column. And that means that if you edit the drawings shown in that column, let me just delete the rest of them, and then in frame number 2, if I redraw this fly, in fact, let me hit D to duplicate that, and then using the eraser, lines and areas, there we go, I remove his wings and then draw them in a different position. And then again, I'll add a third one. And using the eraser, I'll remove his wings and then draw them in another position, like this. And now I've got a repeating cycle of 3 frames. And the whole animation lasts to frame 153. So if I highlight those 3 frames, right click, and from the Edit Cell Numbers menu item, I'll choose Repeat, and put in to repeat it up to frame 153. Now it'll repeat that cycle of 3 drawings, so it's not the same drawing of the fly each time, it's the animated cycle. So if I fit this to the window and then replay that, even though it's quite subtle because it's quite a small little a small animation, you can still see the effect of it changing in each frame. And that helps to give it some life so it's not so stiff. Because having a single drawing moving along a path or using just the animate tool to move left and right, up and down, it makes the actual drawing and the animation feel really, really stiff. So if you've got an option for the character to move, whether it be a bird flapping its wings or fly or whatever it is, then please do so. But if you haven't, you could use the trace over effect to draw one drawing and trace precisely that same drawing on either 2 or 3 frames and repeat those. Then you'll see some movement in the lines as the character or the drawing moves around that path. So I hope that gives you some ideas of what you can use the motion paths for. So let me just take a look at the chat and see what I've missed up here. Absolutely, Maria, don't be afraid to play. That's exactly right. With OpenToonz and Tahoma, I've always said that. Have a play, have an experiment, see what works. If it doesn't work, just delete it. Yes, absolutely, Sean. You can edit the path points, same as the skeleton tool, to move it in and out using the Z-axis. If you go to the animate tool, in fact, on the fly column, on the position options, you'll see SO. Well, there's 2 values you'll need here. You see SO, which is the stacking order, and negative values always appear behind positive values, or smaller values appear behind higher values, and you've got the Z value, or Z for my American friends. So you can move the character in and out of the screen and animate that value. So you can weave in and out, in front of and behind other parts of your animation. Absolutely, yes. So you can have them going in front and behind the pile. So I won't adjust the pile right now, but if I take the animate tool on the pile itself and move that up, there we go. And at the minute, the pile of rubbish is now in front of the fly, and that's because the column is in front of the fly. And you can drag the column behind so the fly is always in front. But if you want the fly to go in and out, you can follow the animation through, and we can set the value. Let's go onto the fly column. So the stacking order at 0 first. The fly can go in front, and then when he comes back to the left, just before he goes behind the pile, I can put the stacking order to -1. And then the fly will now be behind the pile. Let me move this rubbish even more so it's even clearer that he goes behind. So make sure he's in front first. So put the SO to 1. Let me try that. Or should I move the Z? Oops, I'm on the wrong column. That won't help. There we go. So let me go to the timing room, look at this view, and it'll be a lot easier to see what I've done here. Show animated only. So let me delete the stacking order, and the reason it's going wrong is we've got interpolation set, so it's moving slowly from 0 to -1. Instead, what I want to do, if I go to the Preferences tab, Preferences dialog, Animation tab, change the interpolation to constant, and that means that when you set a value, it'll stay that value until it hits another key. So for the fly, let me show the stacking order, and I believe you could do it with the Z or for the stacking order. Right. So the current value is 0, and you find that by double clicking. So if I put that to a positive number, I'm trying to remind myself which way the numbers go. try it with the Z value. Okay. Bring that forward. So let's come here and hold Control as we drag. I think it's because I've not set the center point. I think I might have to leave that for now, but I think you get the idea of the principle there. You absolutely can do that to adjust either the Z or the stacking order to move one column in front of the other, and to have the fly moving in front of and behind the pile. Yes, I believe that, yes, the stacking order, exactly that. It is very much like the traditional concepts of literally stacking pieces of paper on top of each other. Thank you, Maria. I did make a video a while back. I've not considered this for a long time about the different stacking orders and which takes precedence. So yes, there's a video on my channel explaining that, and I think I might need to re-watch that myself and remind myself exactly which takes precedence, because there's the drawing order inside a single drawing on a level. There's the stacking order of the columns, of which column is in front of the other. Then there's animated values using the Animate tool of Z and stacking order. And then there's the effects that can adjust the stacking order to place columns in front of the other. So there's a few different ways you can change that, but absolutely the Animate tool is made purposely for changing that order on the fly, if you'll excuse the pun, to change a column to be in front of and behind another column. But hopefully you can see the idea of why you might use this and where you might use it. Let's put this back down here. So say you can imagine having a few columns with a few different flies, or even the same drawings of the flies moving in different paths around an area. And I bet once you start to play with this and get to feel for how you can set up your motion paths, you'll come up with a lot more ideas of what you can use them for in your animation. Yes, there is very much a specific order. I did have, in fact, if you wait there 1 second, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. So yes, I've got the printout that I created a while back when I created that video showing the stacking order, and in fact my webcam is obviously flipped to make it easier for me. So let me see if I can just flip it back. I can't admit, I can't remember where I set that. I really must look that up to figure that out. So yes, there's a download that you can get from that video to show the stacking order. So as I said, the first one is the drawing order. So the order that you draw the lines. So one line drawn in front or behind another. Then there's drawing groups, which is for vector levels. So you can have a group of objects. So you can group perhaps, if you've got a character, you might group all the facial features together to sit in front of the drawing of the grouped head. Then you've got the plastic mesh, it's got a stacking order, which is animatable. Then you've got the order of the columns in the timeline or X sheet. And then you've got the animatable stacking order using the Animate tool. And then you've got the animatable Z axis, again using the Animate tool. Finally, you've got the effects, which can be placed on top of that to actually move a whole column in front or behind another. So do take a look at that video. In fact, I'll add a link down into the description on YouTube when I've finished the stream today, so you can get to that easier. And that'll explain it in more detail. Okay, so that's the motion paths that you can use in your own animation. Oh, it's very much more complex, Sean. And until you start actually trying to animate some of these orders or working with them and not quite understanding why the order isn't the way you think it should be, until you start doing that, it just seems like magic or confusion as to what the order is. So for instance, if you go to the effects room, you can add an effect. So right now, I've got the fly column in front of the rubbish column. But you can add an effect, so the over effect, for instance, to place one drawing in front of the other. So if I take the rubbish, I'm on the camera there, so let's take the rubbish column. There we go. So that's in front of the fly there. We take a look at the stacking order, make sure they're back to where they should be. And the Z, both should be on 16. There we go. So that's back to normal. So the rubbish is behind the fly, and I can move it in front by adjusting the columns. But you can also put both these two columns through an over effect, which puts one column over another, and change the order here. So here I've got, and it works, it appears to work, I think, a little backwards to what you might expect. That even though the rubbish is sort of plugged in to source 1 at the top of the list, and the fly is plugged into source 2, it's in reverse. So this first source is at the bottom, which is the rubbish, followed by the fly as the second source. And if you click and drag these red arrows, you can flip them. Let me get it. There we go, sorry. So I forgot to put on a preview there. So the rubbish there is in front of the fly, and if you flip them, it's now behind. So you can, even after you've finished your drawing and animation, use effects to change the order of where the columns are drawn and what's drawn in front of the other. And there's quite a few effects nodes that do that, so you're allowed to plug into columns and affects the order of rendering. Hi there, Garnier. Welcome to the stream. Yes, Sean, absolutely. It's really easy when you first, in fact, I was going to say when you first start using OpenToonz, but even if you've been using OpenToonz for a while, if you don't realise about some of these orderings, it's really easy to think, I'll just throw it away and start again. But realise you don't have to. So I'll share that video down in the description on YouTube later, so do take a look at that, that might help a little. But also, I guess, while we're here looking at this, it's worth mentioning that if you're having a problem with columns not appearing, then do check that the columns are all connected to the scene here in the FX viewer, and they're all connected to the table here in the stage schematic. So it's important to know about these controls here for your final output as well. That's right, yes. Even if you've got something stuck in the stacking order, you can use the effects. That's absolutely right. The effects are the final arbiter of what is in front or behind something else, I believe. It's worth experimenting over, but as long as you know where the order can change, then you know where you can start looking. So, for instance, it may be you've got the effects wrong, or you need to use the effects. Or it may be that you've used the animate tool in a way you wasn't expecting, as I was trying to change the order here using the stacking order. So here I've got the fly in front. Let me just try again. Change it to -1, +1. No, so the stacking order doesn't affect this. Let me try the Z. That should do it. No, I'll leave that for today. But I know you can definitely animate it using these the Z and stacking order values, so that's something to take a look at as well. Yes, Jer, it does. There's a lot in OpenToonz and Tahoma, and there's a lot to get used to looking for and to understanding where it goes. But once you start to plug through piece by piece and learn just one new small piece of OpenToonz at a time, the magic disappears and you start to realise why things aren't working or how you can get them to work in a different way. Thank you, Sean. Great spot there. I'll select on the camera in the Animate tool. So let me go back to the fly. So if I zoom in, you can see the fly is at the front. So let me try both stacking order and Z again. So change that to -1. Thank you. Well done, Sean. Excellent. So with the stacking orders using the same value, then the order of the columns on the timeline is what determines what's in front. So the rubbish and the fly columns have both got a stacking order of 0, so they're in the same place. So let's just try that animation again. Excellent, Sean. So let's place the rubbish at the right height. So the fly is travelling at the front. Oops. Remove that animation key there. And then on the way back, we want him to go behind it. So on that frame there, we'll change the stacking order to -1. The fly can come to the left. And then once he's out, here we'll change it to, it can be 0, but I'll change it to +1, because then it'll ignore the order of the columns entirely. There we go. He's in front. And again, -1 at that point. And I'll move the rubbish down a little bit so it's got somewhere to go around. Okay, so it's in front, then behind, and then here I'll go in front with 1, and then behind here with -1, and he just appeared there. So I'll make him at the front 1, and again -1. See where we're going now. And then behind, and then in front, and we'll leave him in front there for the start. Now don't forget, and if you're new and just joined into the stream, if you go to your Preferences dialog, Animation section, I'll set the default interpolation to constant. So if we take a look at the timing room, and we've just adjusted the stacking order, so I'll show only that. You'll see that the value I've set for the key of 0 stays at 0 until the key changes. So there's no interpolation between the values. Sean's asking, can you set the stacking order on the actual motion path points? I don't believe you can. I'll take a look at that in a second, but the motion path is a single vector line. So I don't think you can, but we'll take a look at that in a second. So let's hit play on this. So the fly goes in front and then behind, and alternately in front and behind there. So yes, that's showing how you can animate the stacking order to move one column in front or behind the other. So I hope that helps for that as well. But it's also following the motion path, and Sean was asking about setting the stacking order on the path. And if we go to the FX room, we can see the path on the stage schematic. So the path here on the fly. So if you click it, you'll see the path appear on screen. And as you play the animation, you can see the fly following that path. And if I change to the control point editor, I can click on the path. And as I said earlier, you can edit the path as you can any vector line. So you can change the curve or the position of any of the points to make it work exactly as you want the path to work. So if you're not quite drawing it smoothly enough, you can adjust it later to make sure your character goes precisely in front or behind of whatever they're trying to move around. To change the stacking order on the path, no, you won't be able to, because it is just a single line, so you won't be able to change that. If I click on a column, and that path disappears. So hit replay, and we can see the fly moving. And as the path is like any other animatable value, you can go to the timing room, and we're showing only the stacking order at the minute. So if I hide that and show the position of the fly, the position on the path there for the fly column, you can see the position going from 0 up to 100%. You can do two things here I'd like to share. One is if I press the button at the top right and double click on the graph, you can see the graph pacing of the movement going from the start frame to the end frame, from 0 to 100%. You can see the values on the side. And if you click and drag to highlight the key, in fact that's a linear, so let's right click on the line and we can change that to be speed in, speed out. So now when you right click on the key, you can change the speed to ease into the movement or ease out of the movement at either end. If we go back to the keys that are set, you can take a look at the animation and at some point insert a new key. So here, where the fly changes direction, there, you might want to add a key on frame 23. And we can do that by double clicking on the value on 23 and just pressing enter. So now I've got a key on frame 1 and 23, which means if we go back to the graph, you can change the pacing between those two keys. So you can make the fly slow down at the end before he turns round to come back the other direction. So you can change the exact pacing along that path to make things slow down and speed up as they travel it. Exactly, Sean, like you can do with the skeleton plastic tool or any other animatable value. Kung Pao Geek, welcome to the stream. What time is it now there? You said you thought it started at 12 PM Eastern. I'm guessing it's an hour different to what you expected. It actually starts at 4 PM UK time. I did start at 3 PM a couple of weeks, and maybe that's what you've seen in the past, but 4 PM is a much better time for me, so that's what I try and stick to. I do share the times on my Discord server, and also I try to make sure I set the YouTube event early so you can see a countdown of when it'll start. 12:05, yes, it's an hour ago we started, but as you know, the stream is recorded and will be available on YouTube later if you want to re-watch it. It is, Sean, it's a really useful feature. As I said earlier, perfect, I think, for background animations. Let me just take away that grey outside box by unticking raster bounding box in the view menu. Makes it easy to see. For background animations, as I say here, we've got a fly buzzing around. You might have birds in the distance moving across the scene, an aeroplane moving, although to be honest, an aeroplane moves in a straight line, hopefully. So you can use the animate tool just to animate it moving in a straight line. That would work fine. But for rapidly changing directions, like we've got here, I think this tool is really, really useful. So do have a play with that and see how that works for you. I will show you one last thing with it. So here I'm creating paths on the stage schematic for a particular column. You can connect this path to another column by clicking and dragging from the top of the path and connecting it to the bottom of a column. And you can also visualize the path that we set up with the Path Step Visualiser. So in the Panels menu, in Tahoma 2D this is, and click Motion Paths. Here we go. So here it shows you the two undock that. Let me lock my layout, so I can't do that again. Here it shows the 2 paths. Well, in fact, it shows all the paths we've got created in the stage schematic. And we can choose to show them and visualize their steps ourselves. So that's the first path I did, path number 4. And path number 5 is the path connected to the fly. So you can visualize that and add your steps in as we did earlier to help set up your animation manually if you want to. I'm going to hide that by unticking the eye there. But when you create a new path to use with stop motion or to manually draw over the path, it's worthwhile knowing it does actually create a path here in the stage schematic. So even though you might only create a path just for doing a stop motion movement or movement of your animation, so perhaps we've got an arm swing in here, which we're going to take over 12 frames. We can colour it blue just to be different from the others, and then we can set the ease in and ease out as we need that to be. And you could hand animate over the top of that, as I showed last week and we talked about earlier. But it is still an actual path on the stage schematic. So if you wanted to, you could connect that to the fly and watch the fly moving over that path. So the blue markers on the path line are there only to see visualization for you if you want to hand draw it. The actual pace this fly is moving is the pace that's set up on the timeline using the Animate tool. So it's an important difference, but it's still useful to know that path, a motion path, is just a motion path, whether you're visualizing it to hand draw against or use stop motion, or whether you intend to use the Animate tool to move your character along that path. So I hope that explains everything about motion paths, and you've got some ideas for how you can use them. That's right, Sean. Exactly right. You want to use this for things that you want to look detailed without getting complex and having to take the time to detail them by hand. Yeah, it's exactly that. That there's complicated movements happening, but you don't necessarily want to hand animate those movements. As I say, perfect for background characters or things happening in the background. Yes, Maria, you would. That's exactly right. I'm glad you mentioned that. The path affects the entire column. So if you wanted something else to happen, you'd have to use a different column. So for instance, if I take a copy of this fly, I'll take the 3 frames and I'll insert a new column. And let's paste that in there. I'll hide what I've got so far. So we've got this fly here. Let me repeat those just so it lasts longer. Okay, so now I've got the fly just fluttering away there. Back on the timing room, the FX room, if I create another motion path, let's call this fly 2. Make sure that's selected, hit the path button. And now create another motion path to bring the fly in from outside of the screen, from the right through to here, and animate it. Go from the start. I'll do it quite quickly here through to the final point. And in fact, I've still got my animation default interpolation. Let me change that back while I remember to speed in, speed out. That won't affect the current animation, so I'll have to change this, and I can do that by right clicking on the line on the timeline and changing it here to speed in, speed out. So now you see the fly following that path to here. Now if you wanted the fly to do something else, you can just create another column above, and then move those drawings above. Let me remove those keys. So that's the path animation. And if I hit, in fact what I should have done is hit this repeat button, which repeats that animation, but it only repeats it in that column. So now in this column we can put the fly wherever we want. Let me go to this and call him fly to static. So by copying that, it's attached the path to both of those columns. But if I delete the path from the static one, now here I can just place him where I like, so he can go from flying to this point to the next frame just sitting there. So let's take a look at that. So he flies in along the path, and then in the separate column it continues to flap on the spot in the location you set it for that column. So yes, the path tool, same as the animate tool, works on the entire column. So you want to be careful of what's in the column, because that will get animated in the same way. Thank you, Sean. That's very good of you to say so. You're more than welcome to join us. I'm here every Sunday from 4 PM UK time. I do try and put out the notification of these on my Discord and Twitter, as well as setting up the event early on YouTube. So if you subscribe, you'll get notification of the time it's going to be available. So if there's no other questions, I'll move on to the final topic I'd like to cover for today, but I'll give it a few minutes if you've got anything you want to ask about this, the motion paths, or anything related to Tahoma or OpenToonz. And then I've got one final topic I'd like to cover, and that's to do a quick animation for the next animation challenge on the Discord server. But we'll take a look at that in a second. Thank you, Caligero. I really hope they help. I really do. I'd like to put together a full clear tutorial on the motion paths feature at some point, but for now I wanted to get things out into the live stream. It's kind of what they're here for, just for me to share information that's come to mind or parts of the program that I found useful. Yes, you've got to whack that bell icon to be notified. I release videos every Friday, an occasional one in between, but the Sunday streams I've started doing, I think about a month and a half ago, if not 2 months ago. And if you take a look at my channel, you will see all of the previous streams, so it might be worth taking a look at those. And if you look in the description, I do add timestamps to each topic, so you can see what we've discussed, so you can skip through them and just catch the topics you're interested in and not have to watch through a full 2-hour video necessarily. Thank you, Joe. It's great to have you join us today. There's so much, as you know full well, in OpenToonz and Tahoma, and there's so many pieces of it, and I'm still learning more all the time. So as I get to find out about them, I do like to share them where I can. Good question, Kung Pao. Is there any way to randomize objects into Tahoma 2D? Why would you want to randomize them though precisely? What are you trying to randomize? I think I've got an idea of what you're referring to. And my thoughts at the minute are effects nodes. So for instance, if you're doing snowflakes or rain. Oh, absolutely, Sean. For a little while now, since Tahoma first came out, I've been recommending Tahoma over OpenToonz. OpenToonz is still great. Absolutely use OpenToonz. Tahoma is based on the same base source code, so it has all the same features. But OpenToonz is released officially maybe once a year. Occasionally it's every 6 months, but it's been almost a year since the last release. So any bug fixes that come out you won't get in the official version, although there is the nightly versions, the nightly builds you can download if you want to get a more recent version. But Tahoma has all of the bug fixes that have been made for OpenToonz and 1 or 2 extra features like this Motion Paths Visualiser that isn't in OpenToonz at all. It's been built entirely for Tahoma. And thank you, OpenToonz. That's great of you to say so. Thank you. And it's built really for the stop motion room. And it was based on a feature in Dragonframe stop motion software to allow you to plan your animation for the stop motion. So if I give you a quick show of that. So in last week's stream, I did a demo of stop motion to use or to demonstrate how you can use this motion path feature. So perhaps take a look at that if you haven't seen it already. But I've not tried this today. Everything's plugged in, so it should work. If I choose that. Okay, so this is, there we go. This is my other webcam plugged in. So the idea is that you'd use the motion path, and things are going quite slow on my system at the minute. I've got quite a few things running for the stream. So what you do is you create a motion path and then use the pen tool or one of the geometry tools that you can find in here. So perhaps a line, polyline or arc you might choose to use, but the standard pen tool is really good anyway. So you might draw a line of where you'd like your character to move to. And in fact, if I close that window, we've already got a motion paths panel on the tab here. So using the pen tool, you can draw that you want the character to move forwards and then turn down here. And then you can say, I want them to do that in 24 frames. And it shows you 24 steps of where your character is going to move. And then because you want them to start from a stationary position and ease out, you can change the graph at the bottom here to create some ease out, and it moves the steps closer together. And maybe where they stop, you want the character, I'll add an extra point there, you want the character to ease in, so you want the points closer together at the end. And by setting the FPS on the scene settings, so 24 frames a second here, when you hit play, it sends a little circle, or it tries to, at 24 frames a second to move on that path, so you can get a feel for how your character will move, what pace they'll move at. And you can adjust it further and further. And then when you're ready, you can take a photo, move the character to the next step, and then take another photo. And then you ensure that your character moves at the pace you want it to move in the direction you want it to move at. And because you can zoom in into the normal viewer, you can more easily find the place where you need to place your character. So you can use a lot of the tools already in Tahoma to get your stop motion working smoothly. So let me just turn this off, and that'll bring the pace back up hopefully. There we go. Okay. Let me just take a look at some more questions coming through and some more chat happening. So Kung Pao, you were saying earlier about randomizing objects, randomizing the movement of objects. You can if you use the Animate tool, and I'll show you something in a second for that. Yes, I can share a nightly, the location for the nightly build. Yeah, I'll do that in 1 second as well. If you're a member of the Discord server, I've got a link to all of the different builds and all the different versions of OpenToonz on there. There's a special section I've got for that. So let's bring this over just to show you if you are on the Discord there. So if you go to the OpenToonz help section, you'll see there's a downloads and links section, and that has all of the links to the different versions of OpenToonz, all the useful links to do with OpenToonz and Tahoma, and then other links to do with animation or other Discord servers there. So the nightly builds are here. So if I'll copy that, I'll paste that into here. So if you want the latest version of OpenToonz with all the recent bug fixes, you can find that there. You say you've had some whole projects delete themselves. I've heard this from a few people. They've had things delete themselves, and most of the time when we've had a chat and dug a little deeper, it's not that they've been deleted. All the times I've spoken to people, that is, it's not that the project's been deleted, is that it wasn't saved in the first place. So people will start a project, which you can do, you can add levels, you can start drawing, all without saving. And because the main version of OpenToonz crashes for some people because of their system setup or because of the graphics card or plenty of other reasons, they don't have the project saved. So when they come back to try and load it, the project isn't even there on disk. And even if you do save when you first create a new project, as you're working with the project, do hit save all quite regularly. When you create a new project, you can tick the box at the bottom here to automatically auto-save when you create the project, and that value is set up then in the preferences for the current project or for the current system. So do try and set up the auto-save if you want to use that, or just hit Control-S, which is the standard for save all, as regularly as you can. But something that a lot of people tend to do in OpenToonz in particular is instead of save all, they hit save scene. And that only saves what is in the timeline, which is the exposure of the drawings. So it says show drawing 1 on frame 1, followed by drawing 2 on frame 2, drawing 3, 4, etc. So it saves the order of those, but it doesn't actually save the drawing. To save the drawings as well, always use save all. I can't say that often enough. And one of the benefits of Tahoma is that Jeremy has moved some of the other save options into a separate flyout menu, so you can't accidentally see them and feel like you should click them when you first open up the file menu. You only see save all, so that's why that's there. I tend not to use autosave myself, mainly because in the old version of OpenToonz it used to get in the way. So when you used to autosave, it would bring up a dialog window on screen. And when you're drawing, if you're mid-stroke, it would pop up, you'd lose your stroke, and sometimes things went wrong. The program would crash because you was trying to do two things at once, trying to draw and save. Now with Tahoma, there's no dialog pops up for the autosave, so I think that removes that. So I'd be more inclined to recommend people do autosave, set up autosave on the projects. But if not, just make sure you hit save all quite regular. Yes, in the early days, absolutely, there was a lot of crashes in OpenToonz, especially in the very early days. There's been a lot of work by all the developers fixing the bugs, and the latest version of OpenToonz from early this year is really pretty stable. There are some issues in there that have been fixed since, which is why we talk about the nightly builds. So you might want to consider taking a look at those. But Tahoma has all of those bug fixes and other bug fixes. And for me, touch wood, hasn't crashed. I don't think it's crashed since I've started using it, or if it has, maybe once or twice in the early days. It's not crashed for a very long time. It's really quite a stable piece of software for me, but I know it can depend on your hardware, so your graphics card or just the PC or Mac that you're running on. Okay, so Kung Pao Geek asked about randomizing. Was it the pace or the position? randomising the movement of objects. You can't randomise the direction of objects in that kind of movement. Although I'm telling a bit of a lie, perhaps you can a little bit. The reason I'm saying it, if we take a look at the timing room, in fact, let me start a brand new level here. So if I create a new level, put this to the top, and in here we'll draw, I've still got a thing on screen, so let's go to that path, turn that off. Okay, so for here I'll just draw a circle as is standard. There we go, and then we'll colour it in red. Easy. Okay, so if you want to animate this, the first thing you do is you adjust the centre to place it in the centre of the circle. It just keeps things simpler, and if you want to rotate an object, which in this case a plain circle with no lines, you wouldn't really see it rotating if it was in the centre, but if it was in the corner, you see the circle rotating around that point. So it's important, I think, to place a centre point so you know where it is. And then we change the position on frame 1 to be here, and then I'll have it moving to the right over 24 frames, and I want it moving up and down, so I'll lock the y-axis by pressing the lock key. And as I mentioned earlier, and for those of you joining late you may have missed, there's a small feature, hidden feature, that is so useful at times that if you click and drag on a label next to one of these edit boxes, it actually changes the value. So click and drag to the right, and that changes the value of the X value. Now, for simply moving left and right, you want to do it really on screen, but sometimes it's really useful to know about changing the values up here from the options toolbar. Okay, so I've got the circle moving left to right. So if I go to the timing room, yep, and go to the spreadsheet view of these values, I'll hide all the values that were there before, and for column 7 I'll show the X value. Now you're talking about randomising things. Well, we've set the key explicitly on frame 1 is -65, frame 24 is 1300 and something. Now you can randomise a little bit between these, and I can't remember the exact details that you enter, but if you take a look at the online manual, there'll be some details in there about the expressions. So interpolation expressions. So if you click on the expression, now instead of the interpolation value being linear or with ease in and ease out, you can enter an expression of what the interpolation type is. So you can use some of the functions that's built in to Tahoma or OpenToonz. So I know, for instance, there is a random function, so you can set it to add a random value from one interpolation frame to the next, which is really useful for doing things like camera shakes. So if you've got an earthquake or just a handheld camera view and you want the camera to move fairly randomly, seemingly randomly, but have a small movement, you can use the random expression for that. So it's worth taking a look at the help file for that. So that's expressions for interpolation. So if you take a look at that, so you can change the interpolation between keys, so that can be random. And if you could set a key where your position is off screen, so that the interpolation between that can be random. So as the circle moves across, it could move perhaps down here to be off screen, or a different time it could be randomly moving across the top to be off screen. So you could use the random feature for that possibly. I have played about with a little bit of the random, and I created a camera shake a while back. I can't remember where those values are now, where I wrote it down, what they are, so I can't share them with you today, but there's plenty of functions in there. In fact, let me take a quick look at the manual. Okay, so that's from pressing the F1 in OpenToonz. And if I put in expressions, example expressions, the top item. So here's an example one of having one column pointing at another. I demonstrated this a few weeks ago on the stream. So if you're interested in how this works and how you can set it up, go back a few weeks, maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks, and you'll find an example of that where I do this live on screen during the stream, so you can follow that and see how you add the expression for that. But I believe in here there'll be a link showing some of the functions you can use. And I know you've got, for instance, a lot of the radial functions, so you've got sine, cos and tan to affect how things turn. So yeah, take a look in there at expressions, and that'll be what you'll need to create some sort of random movement. Yeah, scripting, it's quite a lot in there for the scripting for OpenToonz and Tahoma, but it's not documented very, very well, unfortunately. There are some help, some pages for helping scripting in there, so take a look, have a play, and as Maria said earlier, you can't break it, more or less, so do have a play and see what works for you. Okay, so there's one last thing I'd like to do. And I've gone very large for some reason. Let's pop me back down here. That's more like it. Don't like it to be too big on the screen there. You know what I fancy doing? I fancy another topic. So what I'd like to do is take a look finally at the next animation challenge on the Discord animation challenges. So let me start a new project. Standard scene size. So what's this challenge about? Well, this is challenge number 8, which you'll get to when you've completed the first 7 challenges. And so far I've been working with an animated bouncing ball, just to get used to the movement of the ball, of used to the drawing tools in OpenToonz or Tahoma, and start to get used to some of the features in OpenToonz and Tahoma, mainly starting with the timeline or X sheet. Then last time also moving to the animate tool to animate some of the background props to move the ball around the room. This time what I'd like to do is, even though the first 7 challenges I've asked you to animate the ball by hand, to draw it in a sketch style, so I've asked you to draw the ball every single time, to not use copy and paste and to not use the animate tool. This time I'd like to change that slightly to use the motion paths to move the ball around the room. So you can, if you want to, use the animate tool on the background to have more moving parts, or you can have static platforms for the ball to bounce off, entirely your choice. But I'd like you to use the motion path tool to move the ball around the room and to make it bounce realistically. Now you can either have this as a cycle, so the ball can bounce in from one side, bounce around, come back to the first position and then continue on its cycle, if that's a natural way for it to work. Or you can have the ball come in at the top, bounce across the screen and then go out of the bottom, or to bounce in and just land at the bottom, entirely your choice. So what I'm going to do is, let me create a background first. And as always, I'll use the raster pencil tool for drawing the background, just to get a more sketchy feel, and it lets you know that you are just sketching this. This isn't the clear, neat line work. it is the sketching time. So I had a few thoughts earlier and drew a small thumbnail of what I'd like for the position of the panels that the ball is going to bounce on. So again, keeping it nice and rough, I want the ball to fall in from the very top and to hit a panel here, and I will leave this entirely rough, because if I was making it into a large animation later, I'd draw over it neatly using perhaps vector lines, or even just using the perspective line features on the Toonz raster level, or the smart raster level as it is in Tahoma. Okay, and sometimes the pen stops working. Let's get this back again. Okay, I've got the second one here. And I've got a bunch of steps at the bottom here, which are all going to be the same height. So let's put a couple of lines in there from the ruler, and I'll have 1, there we go, 2, 3, and even though this is challenge number 8 on the Discord server, and you can only see this challenge once you completed the earlier 7, because you're on the stream, do feel free to have a go yourself and see how it works for you, and to get used to using the Motion Path tools. So I'm going to make this quite rough today. I'm not going to make it super neat. Let's have a lower one here. In fact, I will bring these down. And I might move them again later if I think it'll help. Okay, and I also want a something up here, a wall to bounce off. So let's just create something like this. And obviously feel free to take a bit more time, a bit more care over it than I'm doing right now. I'm just trying to rush this through so you can see roughly how I'd like you to do it. Okay, so that's the background. And I'll possibly adjust that later. Let's add another level for the ball. And for now, I'll extend that for the same distance. And let's just draw as neat a circle as we can. Let's add the pencil brush again. Okay, that'll do for that. So what I also want to do, I'm going to create this and move this around using the Motion Path tool. So like I said earlier, the center, currently in OpenToonz and Tahoma, the center of the drawing canvas will be locked to the start and end and the place in between of the motion path. So you're better off, if you can, to place the object that you want to move along the motion path in the center of the current canvas. Okay, so if we go to the FX room and we'll make sure we're on the stage schematic, and if we select the ball column and add a motion path by clicking this button here, and with the path selected, we'll make the drawing area as large as is reasonable. With the path selected, I'll press the brush tool and we'll draw the path of where we want the ball to travel. So I want the ball to fall in, bounce off this first platform, bounce up to the wall, down to this floor, and then bounce across onto each of these 3 platforms and out of the screen. And if we choose the control point editor, we can then click on the path and adjust that line in any way necessary. So let me see what needs changing. So on this angle to be a smooth curve here, and to help make it a smooth curve, I can remove some of the control points. And the way you do that is you can click and drag across the control point, which is the center box here, and then tap delete. And that removes that point, leaving just a clearer one here. So now I can get a nicer arc. So I'll take a look at the arcs for each of these curves and make sure they've got a reasonable curve here. So bounce, that bounce is a bit too steep, so bouncing over here. Onto this one, bounce, and then across to the last 2 platforms. So make sure they've got a nice V shape to bounce up there. With each bounce getting slightly less powerful because it's losing power as it moves. Let's remove that one, delete that, and then just place that there. Okay, so I think that's a reasonable path. We'll work out the time of this in a second once we've got it playing. So we'll take the ball, go to frame 1, go to the animate tool, and we can click and drag and it'll move along that path. We want it at 0% on frame 1, and on the last frame, and I know this isn't enough here, so we could have a think of how many seconds this animation might last. So it might last maybe 2 or 3 seconds. It bounces, so it goes go. So 2 or 3 seconds. So let's extend the number of frames. There's 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds. Let's go to the last frame there. And then we'll place the ball at the end of the path, or we can click and type in the position 100 to go to 100% across the path. And I want there to be a gap at the start of the animation before the ball comes in, and then a gap at the end before it loops back to the start. So when I share this as a GIF, it can play without it continually appearing in the screen too quickly. So it can bounce out, wait a second, and then it'll bounce in again. So to do that, I'll hold Control key and click and drag across the ball column, and that'll highlight the drawings and the keys. And I can click and drag those by dragging the bar at the top to move them to the right. So the ball doesn't appear for half a second, and then it appears at the top there. And let's change the background to extend that for all the time the ball's on screen, and then add some extra frames at the end. Let's put on a second before it loops back to the start again. So that won't be right, but let's take a look at the rough timing by hitting play. If I do loop play, we can get a good feel for that while I have a cup of tea. Okay, so the 2.5 seconds does feel about right, but I need to adjust the timing between each of the stages to get a better timing. And this is kind of the fun part. So if we go to the timing room, it's exactly what it's here for. And then on the ball column, we look at the pos path, which is the position of the ball along the path. And we can hide the other columns by right-clicking on the folder for the ball and choosing Show Animated Only. And that'll show only the keys that have got an animatable value in them. So if we click on a position between the first key and last key, we can see the interpolation type is set to speed in and speed out. And that's why it slows in when the ball first comes into the view. And that's not what we want. We want the ball to be going quite fast as it comes in, rather than a static position and then speeding up too much. So we might need to change that. And what we have to do is to find the points where the ball touches part of the background on screen, and then put a key in that position. And then between those two keys, we can change the pace to be speeding up. And then as it bounces, it can be hitting fast and then bouncing away fast and possibly speeding up or slowing down at the top of the curve and speeding up as it falls again. So the ball comes in and it hits the ground there. So frame 27. So to add a key there, just double click in the area on the spreadsheet of 27 and press enter. So at 14.21%, that's where the ball is on the base. So let's move again till it hits the wall in the air, which is that one, I believe, 34. Add a key. Then it's the ground, which is that one. Add a key. On the wall is directly after. So I don't think that really needs much of a key, but we'll add one in there so we can add spacing up to the landing point there on 49. And again on 55. And again on 63. Then the ball bounces out. So now I can easily see where we need to change the timing between keys. And we can do that either here by selecting between the keys and then changing the interpolation type in the drop down and pressing apply. Or you can right click and change the interpolation type here. Or the easiest thing to do is to click the button at the top right to go to the graph view. And then on the graph, adjusting it visually. So here we can see the ease in from the first drawing, the first key. We don't really want that. I want the ball to come in fast, so I'll lift that up. And then as it bounces, as it falls, I want the ball to accelerate. So I will move this handle to the left here, so it accelerates to this point. And then if you right click and choose unlink handles, you can adjust both handles independently. So the ball bounces, and it needs to bounce off quite fast. Let me zoom out a little bit until it hits that. And then it falls, again increasing speed slightly. So I'll unlink the handles there, and I can adjust it slightly to increase the speed. And as it bounces between those two keys, I want it to slow down at the top, at the peak there. So I'll add another key in here. So I'll press the key button. So I've added another key. So between those two keys, I want the ball to accelerate and then slow down at the top. So I need to unlink these handles again. And remember, the frame numbers are going over the top and the distance is going up the side. So if you don't want the distance to move much, you want it to slow down, you want the curve to go this way. But take a look, experiment and see what works for you. And again, as it comes down, I want it to have the same curve, being more flat left to right. And an acceleration up to this point. So unlink the handles and an acceleration. And the same sort of acceleration away as it bounces up. Down to the point where it bounces here. And again, I'll unlink those handles with acceleration that way and a little that way. And finally, I'll unlink those handles and accelerate it into and out of that final bounce. So let's just see how that looks. So that's all happening quite quick, so I need to slow that down, but I'll do that separately after this video, I think, so you're not watching me adjust this too much. But that'll involve selecting a key, right clicking, and then choosing to select all the following keys in this column. And then I'll do that again. So select a key, right click, and choose select all the following keys in this column. There we go. So all the keys after this key are now selected. You can see them highlighted blue. So I can click and drag and move them to the right a little bit, which will slow down the timing between those two keys. So I'll be adjusting that timing for all of those keys to fix them up. But there's just one thing I wanted to show you first that you'll want to do, and that's because all the way through these challenges I've asked that you redraw the ball each time. So the ball isn't a solid ball that's just physically moving around and bouncing. It won't look very natural or very cartoony. It looks almost like a steel ball that's moving, and it just feels too solid and too mechanical. So there's a couple of things we can do for this. The first one, if I zoom out a little bit, here on the first drawing, let's take a look at this. Here we go. Okay, zoom into the ball. On the second drawing, I can trace over this drawing, turn on the onion skin. So I'll trace over this. In fact, because it's moving, it's best not to do it on a moving animation. So what I'll do is I'll open up the level strip and select the drawing in here. So on drawing 2, I will trace over it and add a new drawing 2. And because the tracing will be close but not identical, there'll be a little wobble in the ball when we use it. And I'll do a third one, and I'll trace again over the first drawing. And as soon as you start drawing and have a drawing created, it changes the background colour. That's a little bit too far off. Okay, so that's close but not exact, which is exactly what we want. So if you remember, here we've got the animation keys which control the movement, but the drawings are the green drawings in the background. They're different things on the timeline. So what I can do is I can select on a drawing, and using the W key, and it's the Q and W keys in tandem, I can change the drawing on the second frame here, frame 14, to use a different drawing. So if I press W, that'll use drawing number 2. And on the next one, I press W again twice, and that'll now use drawing number 3. So for those 3 drawings, we're using the 3 different drawings, so there'll be a slight wobble of the ball as we see it moving through the animation. And to make it, rather than doing one frame at a time, changing all the drawings through to the end, I'll delete them all take a note of this going up to drawing 72. So if I click on the drawing on frame 16 and then hit delete, that'll remove that one drawing. And then if I click on the bar at the top of anywhere on the rest of these, it'll highlight all that block of drawings, and I can press delete, and they're now removed. So what I can do is I can highlight those 3 drawings that I've got, the 3 separate drawings. If I right click and from the edit cell numbers menu choose to repeat them, it'll repeat them in order, either a set number of times or up to a frame number. We want this up to frame 72. So hit repeat. So now the drawings are in order of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So there'll be a slight wobble as they move. So that's the first thing we can do, to have the drawings change and appear to change and appear to be a little more hand drawn as they move mechanically. Hey, Dr. Ryan, what do you say? Welcome to the stream. Hi there, Cyan. I didn't see you appear. Motion Path, is that a new feature? No, Motion Paths have been in OpenToonz and Tahoma for quite a while. But they've been presented slightly differently. And if you take a look at the stream earlier, it'll be on YouTube after the stream ends, you'll see exactly what I mean and how you can use them. I spent quite a while explaining how you can use them and demonstrating a few uses for them. So do take a look. I think you'll find it quite interesting. Okay, so we've got the ball moving and it's quite a solid ball. But as the ball bounces, it stays as a solid round ball. And we want it to add some squash and stretch. So the question is, how can we do that? And it's really quite straightforward, and that's to change the drawing that we present on that particular frame. So if we go to drawing 27, we can see the key here shows where the ball is at its lowest point. We can choose, if you press, you can right click and choose create blank drawing, or press Alt D. So that doesn't replace drawing number 3. So the way you can replace it, I believe, if I press the Q key, so Q and W are the replication, the drawing substitution here, look. Drawing substitution forward and backwards to change the drawing between the previous and next drawing on the current level. So if we change this to be drawing number 2, the same as the one before, so these are both drawing number 2s. Now, I believe, if we create a blank drawing, that'll create me a new blank drawing number 4. So you can't replace a single drawing that is its own drawing on a frame, but if it's extended, you can replace one of the extended drawings. So now in drawing number 4, I can actually draw, or attempt to draw, a squashed ball. So the ball can come down and then squash and then bounce away. And in fact, I want this to be slightly lower. So if I take a look here, we'll see the squashy in action. Okay, and because we've now got a drawing for the squash, at a later point where the ball lands, there we can replace the drawing on frame 42, again, either by pressing Q or W, with drawing number 4. And that'll still follow that same path. And the key there, drawing 50, put you as number 4. This one doesn't need quite a squash of a ball because it's got less power going into it. So we'll add yet another drawing. So to add a blank drawing, if you remember, we can't replace drawing 3 with a blank, but if we extend drawing 2 over by pressing Q on this on frame 57, that means that frame 56 and 57 both use the same drawing. So I can replace the second one with a blank drawing. Drawing number 5. So now I can draw another squash ball, but not quite as squashed. Now that ball is quite low there, so I might adjust the motion path to take that into account. But for one last bounce is on frame 64. We'll replace you with drawing number 5 as well. So it's less squashed, but it is squashed a little. And in fact, that's a little bit to the left. So let's move that to the right. There. Let's see how that looks. So the timing's slightly off, but hopefully you'll get the impression of the ball moving along that path. In fact, it's playing quite slow, the FPS there. So I'll use the preview window, which will cache all the drawings and play a lot quicker. And because I'm not showing full screen, if you go to the preview settings and shrink it down by 2, it'll make the preview half the size, which again will make it play slightly quicker. So if I hit preview, and that's come up onto my second screen, so let's bring that over and reset the view, which will put it at 100%. So if we resize that, that is the shrunk by 2, so the half size. It's created all the drawings and cached them, so it should now play at full pace, which it does. So it comes in quite slow at the beginning. I need to adjust that, and then it goes quite quick later. So I'll adjust the timing of those, but I'll do that after the stream. So that's what you need to do for the challenge. So do have a go yourself and see how you get on. And then if you're going through all the challenges in turn, do share your results on the server in the Challenge 8 room. And if you're not going through all the challenges, feel free still to share your animation on the OpenToonz animation section on the server or Tahoma animations. I'd love to see what you can do. So let me just check on the chat one last time. Hi there, Doc. You've not used Motion Path yet in Tahoma. You really should, absolutely should. As I said earlier in the stream, there's two ways of using the motion paths. One, as I've got on screen right now, is having a column actually following a motion path automatically. And the other way is to have a motion path shown on screen. So I've called it a step visualizer, just to see where the steps are during the path, and then you can use those steps to either draw the position of your shape, character or ball as it's moving around, or you can use the step visualizer for stop motion, which is what its intended purpose was from Jeremy. So with stop motion you can have a view through your webcam of the scene and have the steps drawn so you know where to move your character, which is really a really good way of doing it. And if you have time later, do take a look on my YouTube in the live streams section, and you'll see this stream included in there. And take a look down in the description. I'll add some timestamps to each of these explanations so you can jump straight to the right explanation. Hi there, Maria. So you're talking about randomizing, and you said you used repeat random frames for playing around with the flame motion on the Halloween card. Did you do that in an automatic way, or did you just copy and paste different frames around, different drawings around to create a random feel? Because obviously, as I showed a minute ago, you can use the Q and W key to adjust the drawings that you use. I don't think you can change the drawing numbers automatically in Tahoma or OpenToonz, but I could be wrong. So how did you do that automatically? Which tool did you use to do that? Oh, I know what you did. You'd have used the actual random option on the drawings. So if you select a number of drawings, so if you've got a sequence of say 5 drawings, you can right click and in one of these options, there you go, edit cell numbers, random. I'm assuming that's what you did, and it'll shuffle the frames up and give you a random order, which is really handy. Yeah, it's really handy feature that. I've said to quite a few people to work past the basics where you know how to use the timeline and add drawings and move them around, that if you right click, do take a look through a lot of these options, in particular the edit cell numbers, which I think is a terrible name because it isn't what you want to do. You're not trying to change the numbers, you're trying to change the drawings and the way they're presented on screen. But it's worth taking a look at all of these options and starting to get to know how to use them. But as well as these other options at the top here, learn how to use those. But definitely edit cell numbers, take a look at those. Really, really handy. Okay, so I think that's it for today. So I want to just share one last tease, and that's of my video for next week. And that is where I'm going to share, if you didn't see it earlier, my top 5 drawing tips. So for the Friday video 2 days ago, I drew a picture of SpongeBob using these tips. And these are tips that I've picked up over the past couple of years by watching other artists and animators on YouTube. And they've shared their tips, and I've picked a few that I found particularly useful and tried to incorporate them into my workflow. So I've picked my top 5 and I've shared them in that video and explained how to use them and shown how I've used them in last week's video, and I think you will enjoy that, so do take a look at that. So if you're not already subscribed, do subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it, and hit that bell so you're notified when that's released. So thank you for joining me today on today's live stream. It's been great having your company. I think we've covered quite a lot today, and I hope you've learned plenty and perhaps enjoyed yourself along the way. Motion paths, great to use, very useful for automated movements, great for background animations of complex animation that you don't necessarily want to animate by hand, and also to help lay out and plan your animations that you're about to achieve and about to draw manually by hand drawing or with stop motion. So take a look at it, and if you missed some of the explanations early in the stream, have a look at my YouTube channel in a second, and I'll have the video uploaded with timestamps so you can jump to each section. So thank you for joining me, Maria, and everybody else. It's been good having you with me. So, subscribe to not miss next week's stream, and I'll see you then. And that's a guarantee. Have you always wanted to animate but didn't know how to start, and software seemed expensive and difficult to use? Well, with OpenToonz, it's free, powerful, and once you know how, it's easy to use. And it's my mission to get you animating with it today. Hi, my name's Darren, and I've been teaching OpenToonz for the past 3 years, showing thousands of students just like you how easy it is to animate with, and cutting through the jargon to show that anyone can animate with it. And by the end of the course, you'll be able to animate traditionally using OpenToonz. And the course is designed for students brand new to OpenToonz, as well as those new to animation. So take a look at the free lessons I've offered below, and then why not sign up and join me animating traditionally with OpenToonz.